Hello boys, welcome back to another session of video tutorials, and this session is meant for class 11th biology students, and this is meant for 14th August 2020. If you recollect from our memory, it helps us in tracing out that we were talking on photosynthesis, various factors affecting photosynthesis, and sooner we completed photorespiration. Having the clue from photorespiration, now we are entering today in this session respiration in plants. As all of you may recall, respiration is oxidation of glucose. So don't get confused between breathing and respiration. And in our case, it is of course very clear. Respiration is breaking of glucose molecules. Whatever we eat, whether it is in the form of breakfast, in the form of lunch, in the form of dinner, or snacks or juices, everything finally gets converted into glucose. So we say end product of digestion is glucose, and then the glucose gets broken, and when the glucose gets broken, energy is released. This process of release of energy is respiration due to catabolism of glucose. What about in plants? In plants also same thing happens, but this happens with less speed and less quantity. So what is that we are going to learn from this chapter? Do plants breathe? And we will be talking about a very important process called glycolysis, fermentation, aerobic respiration, respiratory quotient or respiratory balance sheet, amphibolic pathway, and RQ, respiratory quotient. So basically, respiration is the biochemical process in which the cells of an organism obtain energy by combining oxygen and glucose, resulting in the release of CO2, H2O, and ATP. ATP is the currency of the cells, as all of you know. Living organisms require energy so that life process keeps on going. Energy is required, and this energy is basically required to break the food particles, big food particles that we consume. So green plants, cyanobacteria, they are all autotrophs. So they obtain food from photosynthesis, but that food also to be broken so that energy is obtained. Animals are heterotrophs and they directly obtain food from plants, then we say herbivores. Indirectly through carnivores they obtain food. And of course saprophytes through dead and decaying matter like fungus. But all these have to be converted into glucose, and the glucose is to be broken. Now, green plants on the other hand undergo photosynthesis as we discussed in our previous session, and it happens in chloroplast. We talked about grana, stroma, remember? And translocation occurs in non-green parts. Outline of photosynthesis and what is the connection between photosynthesis and respiration? It occurs within chloroplast. It's an organic compound, breakdown of molecules to yield energy. So it takes place in cytoplasm as well as mitochondria. Respiration. Compounds oxidized, respiratory substrates will be there, carbohydrates, proteins, fats, organic acids, and oxidation will be stepwise reaction, and it is a controlled reaction through enzymes, and the energy trapped as chemical energy. ATP is the energy currency. Carbon skeleton produced during respiration, it is synthesis of biomolecules. Plants require oxygen for respiration, no specialized organs for gaseous exchange, but have stomata as well as lenticels. So in plants, like in our case, we have got lungs for exchange of gases. In the case of plants, it is stomata and lenticels. Reasons why plants don't need respiratory organs. Each plant part takes care of its own gas exchange needs. There is a very little transport of gases from one plant part to another. Plants do not present great demands for gas exchange. Respiration in plants is far low than animals. So oxygen requirement will be met by photosynthesis, where oxygen will be directly released into cells. And it is basically through diffusion of gases. It is less, but in living cells located closer to the surface of the plants. Example, thick woody stems. Living cells are organized as thin layer beneath bark, opening through lenticels. Most cells are part of it contact with air directly. Loose packing of parenchyma cells in leaves help them in stems and roots, provide an interconnected network of air spaces. So there is an air space. and through that the oxygen will be entering inside. So energy is obtained through complete combustion or catabolism of glucose. So we can represent this in the form of a chemical equation, C6H12O6 plus 6O2 giving rise to 6CO2 plus 6H2O plus energy. That energy will be in the form of ATP. So only we say ATP is the energy currency. So catabolism of glucose, catabolism means breakdown of glucose, several small steps, and energy is released, is coupled to synthesize ATP. All organisms undergo oxidation or catabolism of glucose, and through controlled process, enzymes will be controlling it, and partial oxidation also may take place, and that results in the formation of a chemical compound called pyruvic acid, and this entire process is called glycolysis. As the name says, glyco means glucose, lysis means breaking of glucose resulting in energy production. So Greek word glycose for sugar, lysis for splitting or breaking. So there are three scientists, Emden, Merhoff and Parnas. We call it as EMP. E for Emden, M for Merhoff, P for Parnas, EMP pathway. In anaerobic organisms, it is the only process in respiration. It occurs in the cytoplasm, present in all living organisms. Glucose, if it is partial oxidation to form, 2 molecules of pyruvic acid will be formed, and sucrose and storage of carbohydrate, that is the source of glucose. And the various enzymes that are involved in glycolysis are invertase, hexokinase, isomerase, dehydrogenase, kinase, enolase and pyruvate kinase. These enzymes take part in glycolysis. Now what happens in glycolysis? Starting with glucose 6 carbon, it is broken down to glucose 6-phosphate, that is also 6 carbon, but ATP is spent. ATP is becoming ADP, and when glucose is converted to glucose 6-phosphate, it is hexokinase. You must write the enzyme name also there, hexokinase. And glucose 6-phosphate becomes fructose 6-phosphate, and when it becomes fructose 6-phosphate, it is isomerase, enzyme isomerase involved. Fructose 6-phosphate becomes fructose 1,6-diphosphate or biphosphate. Again, one more molecule of ATP is spent. ATP is getting converted to ADP, and the enzyme involved is kinase. And then fructose 1,6-biphosphate is becoming glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, and that's a 3-carbon compound. And another one is dihydroxyacetone phosphate, that's also 3. So 3 plus 3, it is split. And glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate or 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde, so PGAL we say, it is isomerization, and that becomes by spending by formation of a molecule of NADH, highly energized compound, it becomes 1,3-biphosphoglyceric acid, and this 1,3-biphosphoglyceric acid with the formation of ATP becomes 3-phosphoglyceric acid. If you observe, all these are 3 carbon. From 6 carbon it is converted to 3 carbon, and on the other hand that also becomes this. So that means from this step, from 3-phosphoglyceraldehyde, it is 2 times repetition will be there, okay, and 3-phosphoglyceric acid will become 2-phosphoglyceric acid. 2-phosphoglyceric acid will become phosphoenol pyruvate, PEP, phosphoenol pyruvate, and phosphoenol pyruvate becomes pyruvic acid. That means from one glucose molecule there will be formation of 2 pyruvic acids. And what is the energy that is spent? Now if you see from top, from glucose to glucose 6-phosphate, 1 ATP is spent. Fructose 6-phosphate to fructose 1,6, 1 more ATP is spent. So 2 molecules of ATP spent. How many formed? You can see 1,3-phosphoglyceric acid to 3-phosphoglyceric acid, 1 ATP is formed. So since 2 molecules, 2 ATP to it. Now what is the additionality? Additionality is formation of NADH. NADH is formed. This is how the glucose will be having energy releasing process. So phosphoenol pyruvate then form pyruvic acid, and pyruvate kinase is the product enzyme. So